Hi, thanks for being with me today. Hope you're keeping well. We spend an awful lot of time, don't we, reacting to things in life, reacting to people's demands on us, whether that's in the workplace or in family or in our local community or church. We react to various problems that we face. We react to the news. We react to headlines. We just kind of react to an awful lot of demands on us. And the more reactive we are, the more we kind of live in that state of reacting, the more stress and anxiety we often feel. And we don't want that. We want to live peaceful lives. We want to live joyful lives. I was thinking this week, what if the issue is not so much what we're reacting to or what we're experiencing? What if the real issue is our perspective, how we see these issues in our life? And I was thinking really that spiritual growth requires a change of vision. If we want to grow spiritually, we need to learn to develop new perspective, new ways of seeing things and how we view life. And I've been thinking this week in my quiet times a little bit about Luke chapter 9, verses 28 to 36, the story of the Transfiguration of Jesus on the Mount. You might know the story. And it seems to me that this story of the Transfiguration of Jesus is actually a story about spiritual perspective. It's actually about a shift in vision that occurs in three movements. So let me work through that with you. The first is this, that I think in the story of the Transfiguration, we are encouraged to learn to see glory in the unexpected. When we think about glory, we often think about perfection. We think about power. We think about sort of flawless achievement. But God's glory very often comes in weakness, doesn't it? And when we look at the cross, the most glorious moment, if you like, in human and divine history, is the moment of ultimate weakness. So there's something about finding glory in the unexpected, something about finding glory in weakness. And so if we are to grow spiritually rather than just react to the things that happen in our lives, we need to not just focus on the obvious sort of surface level appearance things, but to learn to look a little bit deeper. In Luke 9 verse 29, it says this, as Jesus was praying, the appearance of his face changed and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. Now that's what we focus on in this passage, isn't it? The glory of Jesus, the changing of the face, the clothing becoming bright as a flash of lightning. That's where we think we see glory. That's where we think we see brilliance in this passage. But 2 verses later, in verse 31, it says this, Moses and Elijah spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. So the transfigured Jesus is speaking to Moses and Elijah, and it says they spoke about his departure. Now, the Greek word used there is exodus, and it's referring to his death. So he's talking with Moses and Elijah about the crucifixion. So this dazzling moment, when we look at it on a surface level and see the glory of Christ being transfigured, actually it's a moment about Jesus embracing the cross. It's about Jesus embracing his death and the humiliation that he's about to face and the pain that he is about to go through and his suffering. So the glory of the Transfiguration is actually framed in a very unexpected way. And the disciples had to look deeper. They had to look below the surface of the transfigured Christ in order to see the reality of what was going on there. Does that make sense? So I think that this passage of the Transfiguration firstly shows us that we need to be able to see glory in the unexpected. So when you and I go through difficult times in life, when we go through suffering, when we go through pain, when there is chaos and confusion in our world, can we transform our spiritual perspective and look deeper and find the glory of Christ even in those painful parts of our lives? Because God is still there and he is still with us in all the pain and the muck and the grime of life. And it is very often in our most difficult times in life that we encounter the grace of God and the glory of God most profoundly. So firstly, learn to see glory in the unexpected. Secondly, we need to learn to see what is real. Before we live differently as Christians, before we kind of really are able to step out into that Christ-like way of living, we do need to learn to see differently. You know, your mindset, your habits, your behavior all flow from what you fix your eyes on. You know, if we fix our eyes on the glory of God, then our habits and our behaviors reflect the glory of God. If we fix our eyes on less holy things, shall we say, then our behaviors reflect those. As we spend time meditating on Jesus, as we focus on him, we see his glory in a way that perhaps we hadn't seen it before. And it's not just it's not a different Jesus that we see. We just learn to see him differently the longer we look. In verse 29 and 32 of Luke 9, it says, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. They saw his glory. Now, this was not a new Jesus. This was the same Jesus who'd always been with the disciples. But they are seeing him in a new way. Their spiritual perspective has changed and his glory has been unveiled. They're learning to see Jesus with spiritual eyes. They're learning to look below flesh level and encounter Jesus with faith. Now, some people will see Jesus purely as a historical figure. When I was training for the priesthood, I learned part of my theology at a local university, and the New Testament lecturer was an atheist. You know, he was very upfront about it, didn't believe, but he was a Greek scholar and he loved the Greek New Testament text, so he taught us the New Testament. But he only saw Jesus as a historical figure, even though he spent all day, every day with the scriptures. Jesus remained veiled to him and was a historical figure. But for believers, for you and I, we can see Jesus as he truly is. His glory is unveiled to us. Now, that doesn't happen automatically. The unveiling of Jesus, learning to see what is real, doesn't happen automatically. It takes practice, it takes time, it takes prayer, it takes meditation on the cross, it takes just bathing in God's presence for hour after hour after hour. And over a period of time, the closer we draw to Jesus, the more unveiled he becomes, and the more we're able to see the reality of who he is. And once we see the glory of Jesus, then it changes the way we see everything else. We can't look at life the same again. We can't look at the world. We can't look at other people. We can't look at those in need the same way once we've seen the glory of Jesus. The context changes as we see things in the light of Jesus' glory. You know, our past mistakes take on a different perspective. Our future hopes take on a different perspective. Our present hopes, our present struggles, all take on a different perspective when we see the reality of the glory of Jesus. Part of this story of the Transfiguration is about learning to see what's real and spending time in the presence of Jesus so that his glory becomes unveiled to us. And then thirdly, from this passage, as our spiritual perspective in life changes, then we learn to listen and live in the light of that new perspective. the purpose of spiritual clarity, the purpose of a renewed spiritual perspective, the purpose of developing a more spiritual mindset is to live differently. The climax of the Transfiguration story is not the light of Jesus, but the voice from heaven in verse 35 that says this. A voice came from the cloud saying, "This is my son whom I have chosen. Listen to him." Listening to God's voice, listening to Jesus is the ultimate way to shift our perspective in life. Don't listen to your fears. Don't listen to Satan kind of making you feel continuously guilty about the past. Don't listen to the prevailing culture that mocks God. Don't listen to what just makes you feel comfortable in life. Listen to Jesus. Listen for God's voice in all his glory and in all his humanity. Because spiritual clarity isn't complete until it turns into spiritual obedience. Once we've learned to see Jesus differently, once we've learned to see him as he really is, once we've listened to his voice, the culmination of that then is spiritual obedience. When we hear Jesus' voice and when we choose to obey, then it changes how we speak, it changes how we live, it changes how we love, it changes how we move into the future. Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 4:18, we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. The question of the Transfiguration is, will you live with that new spiritual perspective? Will you shift your mindset? Will you spend time in the presence of the glorious Jesus so that it shapes how you see your struggles in life? Will you retrain your vision to recognize God's glory in unexpected places, in and through unexpected people? And crucially, will you listen to and respond to and obey the voice of God and live for him? We don't need transfiguration experiences. They are wonderful when we have these kind of extraordinary moments of worship and when we have these extraordinary mountaintop experiences with God. But we don't need transfiguration experiences. What we need is to pray that God will change our perspective, that we will increasingly see life with spiritual eyes. And once we do that, we are better able to recognize God's presence with us always and in and through all things. I hope that's been helpful. Let me know in the comments below. It's always lovely to spend time with you. Thanks for giving me so much of your time today, and I look forward to being with you again really soon. Take care. Bye.